The night I drove into Wrenfield, the fog lay low across the road like a sleeping animal. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the grey, and for a moment I wondered if I had taken a wrong turn. The village was supposed to be small, but not invisible. I was halfway through the bend when something stepped into the beam of my lights. A cat, black from head to tail, its fur absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. It did not flinch. It did not run. It simply stood there, staring at me with eyes that were not yellow or green but a pale, washed-out grey, like the color of old photographs. I braked hard, the tires skidding on the damp asphalt. The cat did not move. It watched me with a stillness that felt deliberate, almost human. When I finally stopped, the creature walked slowly toward the car, its gaze fixed on mine through the windshield. For a moment I felt something shift in my chest, a strange pressure like a hand closing around a memory I could not quite name. Then the cat blinked, and the feeling vanished. I exhaled, realizing I had been holding my breath. The cat stepped aside and disappeared into the fog. I waited a moment, shaken, then continued down the road until the first houses of Wrenfield emerged from the mist. I was here to visit my old friend Thomas, who had insisted I come after months of silence. His last message had been unsettling. He wrote that something in the village was changing people, twisting their relationships, turning neighbors into strangers. He said he needed someone he trusted, someone untouched. I had laughed it off at first. Thomas always had a dramatic streak, but the tone of his voice in the final call had been different. Afraid. So I packed a bag and drove through the night. The village was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. No lights in the windows, no movement behind curtains. Only the fog drifting between the houses like a living thing. Thomas lived at the far end of the main street. His cottage was small, with a crooked fence and a porch light that flickered weakly. I knocked once, then twice, no answer. I tried the handle. The door opened. Inside, the air felt heavy, as if the house had been holding its breath. The furniture was in place, the kettle still warm on the stove, but Thomas was nowhere to be found. On the table lay a single sheet of paper with my name written on it. Before I could read it, I heard a soft sound behind me. A faint scrape on the floorboards. I turned. The cat from the road sat in the doorway, its pale eyes fixed on me. It had followed me, or perhaps it had been waiting. The pressure returned in my chest, stronger this time. A tightening, a warning, or a claim. The cat blinked slowly, and in that moment I felt something shift again. Not in me, but in the room itself. As if the house had suddenly become aware of my presence, the cat stepped forward, its gaze never leaving mine. I should have run. I should have shouted for Thomas. I should have done anything but stand there frozen as the creature approached. Instead, I whispered a single word, "Hello." The cat tilted its head as if amused, and somewhere in the house a floorboard creaked, not from weight, from breath. I was not alone. The note on the table was written in Thomas's handwriting, but the letters looked strained as if each stroke had been carved under pressure. My name stood alone at the top, followed by a single sentence. "Do not trust anyone who knows you." I read it twice, then a third time, hoping the meaning would shift into something less absurd. But the words remained the same, stark and cold. A warning, a plea, or a confession. The house creaked again, a long, slow exhale from the hallway. I turned toward the sound, but nothing moved. Only the fog pressed against the windows, thick enough to blur the world outside. The cat sat beside the door, its pale eyes fixed on me. It did not blink, it did not breathe. It simply watched, as if waiting for me to understand something I could not yet see. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. The paper felt warm, as if someone had held it moments before I arrived. Thomas had always been steady, rational, grounded. For him to write something like this meant he had been afraid, truly afraid, and the silence in the house suggested he had not left willingly. I stepped into the hallway. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, but the sound felt wrong, as if the wood were reacting not to pressure but to presence. The air grew colder the farther I walked, and the shadows stretched unnaturally long along the walls. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. Thomas's study. I pushed it open. The room was a mess. Papers scattered across the floor. Books pulled from shelves. A chair overturned, but there was no sign of a struggle. Everything looked placed, arranged, as if someone had wanted it to appear chaotic without understanding how chaos truly worked. On the desk lay a photograph. I picked it up. It was a picture of Thomas and me taken years ago during a hiking trip. We were smiling, arms slung over each other's shoulders, but something was wrong. The background was blurred, warped, as if the landscape had been smudged by an unseen hand, and Thomas's face looked slightly off. The eyes too wide, the smile too tight, as if the memory itself had been altered. Behind me, the cat let out a soft sound. Not a meow. Something lower. A vibration. A warning. I turned. The hallway was no longer empty. A figure stood at the far end, half hidden in the fog seeping through the open front door. Tall. Still. Watching. My breath caught in my throat. Thomas. Or someone wearing his shape. He stepped forward, and the floorboards did not creak beneath him. His movements were smooth, too smooth, as if he were gliding rather than walking. His eyes were fixed on me, but there was no recognition in them. Only hunger, or need. I backed into the study, my hand gripping the edge of the desk. Thomas stopped at the threshold, his head tilting slightly like a curious animal. His voice, when it came, was soft. "Familiar wrong you came," the cat hissed, a sharp, violent sound that cut through the air like a blade. Its fur bristled, and its pale eyes glowed faintly. Thomas's expression shifted. Not anger, not fear, something else. Something like disappointment. He took one step back into the fog, then another, then he was gone. The cat turned to me, its gaze heavy, almost accusing. I realized then that the note had not been a warning about strangers. It had been a warning about the people I loved, and whatever had taken Thomas was not finished with me. I locked the front door as soon as the fog swallowed the last trace of Thomas's retreating shape. The latch clicked with a dull finality, but it did nothing to steady my breathing. The house felt smaller now, as if the walls had shifted closer while I was not looking. The cat sat in the center of the living room, its pale eyes fixed on me with an intensity that bordered on accusation. I wanted to look away, but something in its gaze held me still. Not hypnotic, not supernatural, just deeply, disturbingly aware. I forced myself to move, pacing the room in slow circles. Every step felt like a question I could not answer. What had happened to Thomas? Why he had looked at me like a stranger? Why the cat had reacted as if it had seen him before? I stopped at the window outside. The fog pressed against the glass like a living curtain. Shapes drifted within it, vague and shifting, but none of them resolved into anything human. The village beyond was silent, its houses dark, its streets empty, a place abandoned by sound. I leaned closer. A figure stood at the edge of the yard, tall, motionless, facing the house. My breath caught. For a moment I thought it was Thomas again, but the posture was wrong. Too rigid, too still. The head tilted slightly upward, as if listening to something inside the house. I stepped back from the window. The cat hissed, low and sharp. The figure did not move, it simply remained there. A silhouette carved from the fog, watching the house with a patience that felt predatory. I reached for my phone, but the screen stayed black, no matter how many times I pressed the button. Dead, or drained, or something else entirely. The figure shifted. Not forward, not backward. Just a subtle change in stance, like someone adjusting their weight. But the movement was wrong, too smooth, too fluid. As if the body were learning how to stand, a cold shiver crawled up my spine. I turned away from the window, trying to steady my thoughts. I needed to find clues. Something Thomas had left behind. Something that explained the note, the photograph, the way he had looked at me as if I were a stranger wearing his friend's face. The cat followed me into the hallway, its steps silent. It stayed close, brushing against my leg once, almost reassuringly. Or maybe claiming me. I could not tell. I opened the door to the guest room. Inside, the air felt colder than the rest of the house. A suitcase lay open on the bed, mine. But I had not unpacked it. I had not even opened it. Clothes were folded neatly inside. Too neatly, as if someone had arranged them with careful, deliberate precision. A shirt I had not worn in years lay on top, pressed and clean. Beneath it, a sweater I had thrown away long ago. My heart pounded. Someone had been expecting me, someone who knew me, someone who remembered things I had forgotten. The cat jumped onto the bed, its gaze fixed on the suitcase. Its fur bristled, and it let out a low growl that vibrated through the room. I reached into the suitcase and lifted the sweater. A photograph lay beneath it. Not of me. Not of Thomas, of the man standing in the yard. His face was clearer in the picture, human. Almost. But the eyes were wrong, too pale. And the way he stood beside the house felt familiar, as if he had been there many times before. I turned the photograph over. On the back, written in the same strained handwriting as the note, were 3 words. "He knows you." A sound came from the window, a soft tap. Then another, then a slow, deliberate scrape. The cat hissed again, louder this time. I turned toward the sound, dread rising like a tide. The man from the yard was at the window, and he was smiling. The smile did not belong on any human face. It was too wide, too patient, stretched across features that looked almost familiar but not enough to be comforting. The man at the window pressed one hand against the glass, fingers long and thin, leaving no fog or warmth behind, as if he had no heat at all. I stepped back, my pulse hammering in my throat. The cat leapt onto the windowsill, its fur bristling, its pale eyes glowing faintly. It let out a low growl that vibrated through the room like a warning bell. The man's smile faded, not slowly, instantly, as if someone had erased it. He tilted his head, studying the cat with a strange childlike curiosity. Then he tapped the glass once with a single finger. The sound was soft, but it echoed through the house like a knock on a coffin lid. I forced myself to move. I grabbed the curtains and yanked them shut, blocking the sight of the figure. The fabric trembled in my hands. The house felt colder, as if the fog outside had seeped through the walls. The cat jumped down and circled my legs once, brushing against me with a deliberate slowness. A grounding gesture, or a claim. I could not tell which. I needed answers. I needed to understand what Thomas had discovered before he vanished. I returned to the study, searching through the scattered papers, hoping for something that made sense. Most of the pages were filled with notes about the villagers, names, dates, observations. But the handwriting grew more frantic the deeper I read, the lines slanting, the ink pressed too hard into the paper. One sentence appeared again and again. They are not who they were. I swallowed hard. Another page described arguments between neighbors who had once been close, marriages falling apart overnight, parents refusing to recognize their own children, friendships dissolving into sudden hostility, not because of conflict, because of recognition, or the lack of it. The cat jumped onto the desk, scattering papers. It stared at one page in particular, tapping it lightly with its paw. I picked it up. It was a sketch, rough, hurried, but unmistakable. The man from the window. Beneath the drawing, Thomas had written a single line. He remembers you differently each time. A chill ran through me. The idea was absurd, impossible, but the memory of the man's smile made my stomach twist. Had he looked at me with recognition, or confusion, or hunger? I could not tell anymore. A sudden thud shook the house. I froze. Another thud, closer, heavy. Deliberate, the cat hissed, its back arching. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding. The sound came again from the front door. A slow, rhythmic pounding, as if someone were knocking with the side of their fist. I approached the door, each step heavier than the last. The pounding stopped, silence. Then a voice. My voice let me in. The cat snarled, a sound so sharp and violent it made my skin crawl. It positioned itself between me and the door, its gaze fixed on the wood as if it could see through it. The voice came again, softer this time. Please, it is cold out here. I backed away, shaking. The voice was perfect, every inflection, every breath. But it was wrong. Empty, hollow, like a recording played through a broken speaker. The cat growled, low and steady. The voice shifted. It became Thomas's "Open the door." My breath caught. The sound of his voice hit me like a blow, familiar, warm, desperate. But the cat's reaction did not change. It stood rigid, fur raised, eyes glowing with a pale, unnatural light. The voice outside spoke again. This time it was neither mine nor Thomas's. It was something in between, something learning, something practicing. The doorknob rattled. The cat lunged at the door, claws scraping the wood, hissing with a fury I had never heard from any living creature. The rattling stopped. Silence returned. But the house no longer felt empty. Something was waiting on the other side, and it knew my voice now. The house did not settle after the voice at the door faded. It felt as if the walls were listening, waiting for something to happen. The air grew heavier, thick with a pressure that made it hard to breathe. The cat paced the hallway, its tail lashing, its pale eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. I needed to get out. Not to leave the village, not yet, but to breathe air that did not feel borrowed. I grabbed my coat and moved toward the back door, hoping the fog had thinned. The cat blocked my path. It stood in front of the door, unmoving, its gaze fixed on me with a warning so clear it felt like a spoken word. I hesitated, unsure whether to push past it. The creature's presence was small, but its intent filled the room. A sound came from behind me, a soft, hesitant knock. Not at the front door, at the kitchen doorway. I turned slowly. A woman stood there. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, eyes wide with fear. She wore a heavy coat, damp with fog, and her hands trembled as she clutched the frame. I did not recognize her, but she looked at me as if she knew me well. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "You should not be here," the cat hissed, low and sharp, but the woman did not react. She stepped into the kitchen, her gaze darting toward the windows, the walls, the ceiling, as if expecting something to emerge from them. I swallowed hard. "Who are you?" She flinched at the question, as if the words hurt her. "You do not remember me." Her voice broke on the last word. She looked devastated, betrayed. Something intimate. I shook my head slowly. I have never seen you before. The woman's expression twisted, not anger, not confusion. Something deeper, a grief so raw it made my stomach twist. She took a step toward me. We grew up together. My breath caught, the room tilted. The cat moved between us, its back arched, its fur bristling. The woman's eyes filled with tears. You promised you would come back. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. None of this made sense. I had never been to Wrenfield before. I had never known anyone from this village. I had no childhood memories of fog or empty streets or pale-eyed strangers, but the woman looked at me with a certainty that felt like a blade pressed against my throat. She reached into her coat and pulled out a photograph. My hand shook as she held it out. The picture showed two children standing in a field. A boy and a girl. The boy looked like me. Not similar, identical. Same eyes, same smile, same scar on the chin from a fall, I remembered vividly. The girl looked like her. I stared at the photograph, my mind reeling. The memory of the scar burned in my skin, but the field in the picture was not one I recognized. The girl was not someone I remembered. The moment captured in the image did not exist in my life. The woman whispered, "You left me here." The cat snarled, a violent sound that made the lights flicker. It leapt onto the counter, positioning itself between me and the woman, its gaze locked on her with a fury I had not seen before. The woman's expression changed. Her grief vanished. Her posture straightened. Her eyes went empty. She tilted her head, studying me with the same unnatural curiosity I had seen in the man at the window. When she spoke again, her voice was wrong. Flat. Hollow. "He remembers you differently each time." The same words Thomas had written, the same warning. The woman stepped backward into the doorway, her movements too smooth, too fluid, as if her body were learning how to move. The cat lunged. Not at me, at her. The woman's face twisted into something that was not human, not familiar, not hers. She let out a sound that was not a scream, not a voice, not anything that belonged in a living throat. She fled into the hallway, moving with a speed that made my blood run cold. The cat chased her, its pale eyes blazing. I stood frozen, the photograph trembling in my hand. The boy in the picture looked exactly like me, but I had never stood in that field. I had never known that girl. And yet the memory of her hand in mine flickered at the edge of my mind, faint and impossible. Something in Wrenfield was rewriting the past, not replacing people, rearranging relationships, and I was next. I did not sleep. The house would not let me. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft and deliberate, stopping just outside my door. The cat stayed awake as well, perched at the foot of the bed, its pale eyes fixed on the darkness as if tracking something I could not see. When dawn finally came, the fog had not lifted. It clung to the windows like a second skin. I needed answers, and the house was no longer the place to find them. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside, ignoring the cat's low growl of protest. The village was silent. Not empty, silent, as if every sound had been swallowed before it could form. The fog muffled everything, turning the world into a blurred watercolor. Houses stood in neat rows, their windows dark, their doors closed. But I felt eyes on me, watching. Waiting, I walked toward the main street, my breath visible in the cold air. The fog parted slightly as I approached the old bakery. The door creaked open before I touched it. A woman stood inside. Gray hair, wrinkled hands, eyes that flicked over my face with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. "You came back." Her voice trembled with relief, or fear, or both. I shook my head. I have never been here before. The woman's expression collapsed. Her shoulders sagged and she pressed a hand to her mouth as if trying to hold back a sob. "Do not say that, please. Not again. Again." The word hit me like a blow. I stepped back, but she followed, her hands trembling. "You promised you would stay this time. You promised you would not forget us." I stared at her, my heart pounding. Her grief felt real, too real. But the memory she described did not exist. Not in my life. Not in any life I remembered. The cat appeared at my feet, silent as a shadow. The woman flinched when she saw it, her face twisting with fear. "Keep that thing away from me." Her voice cracked. She backed into the bakery, shaking her head violently. "It ruined everything last time. It took you from us." The cat hissed, a low, dangerous sound that made the air vibrate. The woman slammed the door shut, the lock clicking into place. I stood in the street, stunned. The fog shifted. A man emerged from it. Middle-aged, broad-shouldered. His eyes widened when he saw me. "You are alive," he said it with awe, with disbelief, with something like devotion. I stepped back. "Do I know you?" He laughed, a broken, desperate sound. You know all of us. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden carving. A figure, a man. Me. The details were perfect. The scar on my chin, the shape of my jaw, even the way I held my shoulders. He pressed it into my hand. We kept this for you, to remember you by. My stomach twisted. The carving felt warm, as if someone had held it moments before. The man's expression changed suddenly. His smile faded. His eyes went empty. He tilted his head, studying me with a slow, unnatural curiosity. You are different this time, the cat growled, stepping between us. The man's face twisted into something wrong. His jaw slackened. His eyes widened. His posture shifted, becoming too loose, too fluid. He whispered, "He remembers you differently each time." The same words again and again. The man stepped back into the fog, his movements jerky, as if his body were being pulled by invisible strings. Then he vanished. I stood alone in the street, the wooden carving trembling in my hand. The village remembered me, but I did not remember it. And the cat, the only creature that seemed to understand what was happening, brushed against my leg with a slow, deliberate motion. Not comforting. Warning. Something in Wrenfield was rewriting the bonds between people, and it had started with me. The fog thickened as I walked deeper into the village, the wooden carving still clenched in my hand. The cat followed close behind, silent and alert, its pale eyes scanning the shifting gray as if expecting something to emerge at any moment. Every house I passed felt occupied, but not by people. By memories, by expectations. By versions of me that had lived here in lives I had never lived. A door creaked open to my left. A man stepped out, thin, nervous. His eyes widened when he saw me. Elias, the name fell from his lips like a prayer. I froze. That is not my name. The man's face twisted with confusion, then fear, then something like anger. Do not do this again. Not again. Not after everything we lost. He stepped toward me, his hands trembling. You promised you would stay. You promised you would not forget us. You promised you would not forget me. I backed away, shaking my head. I do not know you. The man's expression collapsed. He pressed a hand to his chest as if something inside him had cracked. You always say that. Every time, the cat hissed, stepping between us. The man flinched at the sound, his eyes darting to the creature with a hatred so sharp it felt personal. It took you from us. It always takes you. He spat the words like venom. The cat's fur bristled, its gaze locked on the man with a cold, predatory intensity. The man's posture changed. His shoulders straightened, his breathing slowed, his eyes went empty. He tilted his head, studying me with that same unnatural curiosity I had seen in the others. He whispered, "He remembers you differently each time." The words were wrong in his voice, too smooth, too practiced, as if he were repeating something he did not understand. He stepped backward into the fog, his movements jerky, puppet-like. Then he vanished. I stood alone in the street, my heart pounding. The cat brushed against my leg, grounding me, or claiming me, or warning me. I could not tell anymore. I continued walking. More doors opened. More faces emerged. More names were spoken. Jonah, Michael, Rowan. Each name delivered with certainty, each face filled with recognition, each voice trembling with grief or anger or longing. But none of them were mine. None of them belonged to me. The cat hissed at every person who approached, its pale eyes glowing brighter with each encounter. The villagers recoiled from it, their expressions twisting with fear and hatred. They blamed the cat. They feared the cat. They believed the cat had taken me from them. But the cat was the only thing that reacted to the villagers with hostility, the only thing that seemed to understand what they had become. I reached the center of the village. A small square, a stone well, a wooden bench, a notice board covered in old papers. One sheet caught my eye. A missing person poster, my face, my name, but not my handwriting, not my photograph, not my life. The poster described a man who had lived in Wrenfield for years. A man who had friends here, family here, a man who had vanished without a trace. A man who looked exactly like me, my breath caught. The cat jumped onto the bench, staring at the poster with a low growl. I reached out and touched the paper. It felt warm, as if someone had just pinned it there. A voice spoke behind me. Soft, familiar. Wrong. You came back, I turned slowly. Thomas stood at the edge of the square, but his eyes were not his. They were pale. Washed out. Empty. The cat hissed, louder than before, its fur rising like a storm. Thomas smiled. Not kindly, not warmly, but knowingly, as if he had been waiting for this moment, he whispered, "You do not remember who you are, and neither do they." He stepped forward. and the fog closed in behind him like a door. Thomas stepped into the square, the fog curling around him like a living shroud. His eyes, once warm and familiar, were now pale and empty, reflecting nothing but the shifting gray. The cat hissed, its back arching, its fur rising like a storm. I took a step back. Thomas smiled, not the smile I remembered. Not the one from late nights and shared stories. This smile was slow, deliberate, stretched across his face like a mask that did not quite fit. "You came back." His voice was soft, almost gentle, but something beneath it vibrated wrong, like a chord played on a broken instrument. I swallowed hard. "Thomas, what happened to you?" He tilted his head, studying me with a curiosity that felt predatory. "You left." The words hit me like a blow. They were spoken with certainty, with accusation, with a grief that did not belong to the man I knew. I shook my head. "I never lived here." Thomas blinked slowly. "You always say that." The cat growled, stepping between us. Thomas's expression flickered, a brief flash of something like fear, or recognition, or hunger. He took a step back. "They are waiting for you." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They always wait." He turned and walked into the fog, his movements too smooth, too fluid, as if his body were being guided by something unseen. The fog swallowed him whole. The cat nudged my leg, urging me away from the square. I followed, my mind spinning. Every face in the village had looked at me with recognition. Every voice had spoken my name with certainty. Every memory they described felt like a shadow of something I had never lived. But the worst part was the doubt creeping into my own mind. What if I had been here before? What if something had taken those memories? What if the cat had taken them? The creature walked ahead of me, leading me back toward Thomas's cottage. The fog parted around it, as if afraid to touch its fur. The air grew colder the closer we came to the house. When I stepped inside, the door closed behind me with a soft click. The house felt different. Alive, listening, the cat sat in the center of the living room, staring at the hallway. Its tail flicked once, twice, then it let out a low growl. A sound came from the back of the house. A whisper. My name, not spoken by a person, spoken by the house itself. The walls creaked, the floorboards shifted, the air thickened. The whisper came again, louder this time, curling through the rooms like a cold breath. I stepped into the hallway. The house exhaled. My name echoed from every direction, layered with voices I did not recognize. Men, women, children, all calling for me. The cat hissed, its eyes glowing with a pale, unnatural light. It moved ahead of me, guiding me toward the study. The door was open inside. The papers on the desk fluttered as if stirred by an unseen wind. The photograph of Thomas and me lay face down. The wooden carving I had taken from the villager's hand sat in the center of the desk, upright, as if placed there deliberately. I approached slowly. The carving had changed. The face was still mine, but the eyes were pale, washed out, empty. Just like Thomas's, just like the villager's, just like the woman in the kitchen, just like the man at the window. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. The house whispered again. Not my name this time. A different word. A word I did not know. A name that was not mine. But the moment I heard it, something inside me twisted, as if a memory I did not possess had been pulled to the surface. The cat leapt onto the desk, knocking the carving to the floor. It shattered on impact, splintering into pieces. The whispering stopped. The house fell silent. The cat stared at me, its pale eyes burning with something I could not decipher. Warning, accusation, recognition. I knelt and picked up one of the broken pieces of the carving. A single word was carved into the wood, a name not mine, but the house had spoken it. And the moment I read it, my breath caught in my throat. Because I knew it. I should not have known it. But I did. The cat hissed sharply, as if trying to stop the memory from forming too late. The name echoed in my mind like a forgotten promise. And for the first time I realized the truth. The village was not remembering me wrong. I was remembering myself wrong. The name carved into the broken piece of wood pulsed in my mind like a bruise. It was not my name. It had never been my name. And yet the moment I read it, something inside me twisted, as if a memory I had never lived had been forced into place. The cat hissed sharply, its fur bristling. It paced in a tight circle, its pale eyes fixed on the fragment in my hand. Not with fear, with fury. I dropped the piece. The house creaked, a long, slow groan that sounded almost disappointed. The whispering returned, faint at first, then growing louder, curling through the walls like cold breath. The name echoed again. Not spoken by a person, spoken by the house, spoken by the village, spoken by something that remembered me better than I remembered myself. The cat leapt onto the desk, knocking papers aside, scattering photographs and notes. It stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Its eyes glowed brighter than before, pale and unnatural. I backed away. What are you? The cat did not blink. The house whispered again. The same name, the same wrongness, the same impossible familiarity. A memory surfaced. Not a real memory. A memory that felt placed. I saw myself standing in the village square, not as I was now. Younger. Different. Surrounded by faces I recognized from the fog. They smiled at me. They spoke to me. They touched my shoulder, my arm, my hand. They knew me. They loved me. They needed me. And the cat stood at the edge of the square, watching with pale eyes, its fur bristling, its posture tense. Not protective, not hostile. Hungry. The memory shattered. I stumbled backward, gasping for breath. The cat watched me, its gaze unblinking. The house whispered again. This time the voice was Thomas's. You left us. I shook my head violently. No, I never lived here, the whisper shifted. A woman's voice. You promised you would stay. Then a child's voice. You forgot me. Then dozens of voices. Hundreds. All speaking at once. All calling the same name, the name that was not mine. The cat hissed louder than before, its body trembling with tension. It leapt from the desk and ran into the hallway, its claws scraping the floorboards. I followed. The house felt alive beneath my feet, the floor shifting subtly, the walls breathing. The whispering grew louder, echoing through every room, every corner, every shadow. The cat stopped at the front door. It turned to me. Its eyes glowed with a pale, unnatural light. It let out a sound I had never heard from any living creature. Not a hiss, not a growl, something deeper. Older, a sound that vibrated in my bones. The door swung open. Fog poured into the house, and the villagers stood outside. Dozens of them, maybe more. Their eyes were pale, their faces were blank, their bodies were still. They spoke in unison. You came back. The cat stepped forward, placing itself between me and the villagers. Its fur rose, its tail lashed, its eyes burned with cold light. The villagers spoke again. You belong to us. The cat snarled, a violent sound that made the fog recoil. The villagers did not move. They did not blink. They did not breathe. They whispered the name again. The name that was not mine. The name the house had spoken. The name carved into the wood. The name that felt like a memory forced into my skull. The cat turned to me. Its eyes locked on mine. And in that moment, I understood. The villagers were not remembering me wrong. They were remembering someone the cat had taken. Someone the cat had unmade. Someone the cat had replaced. The cat hissed as if denying the thought. But the truth was already forming. The cat was not protecting me. The cat was not guiding me. The cat was not warning me. The cat was choosing me. The villagers whispered the name again, and for the first time, I felt it settle into my mind like a seed. A name I had never lived, a life I had never lived, a bond I had never formed. But the village remembered it. The house remembered it. The cat remembered it. And now, so did I. The villagers stood in the fog like statues carved from ash, their pale eyes fixed on me, their voices whispering the name that was not mine. The cat hissed, its body rigid, its fur bristling with a fury that felt ancient. The fog thickened, curling around my legs, my arms, my throat. The villagers stepped closer, moving in perfect unison, their feet silent on the ground. Their faces were blank, but their voices trembled with longing. You belong to us. The cat snarled, stepping forward. Its eyes glowed brighter, pale and cold, cutting through the fog like twin lanterns. The villagers recoiled, their bodies jerking backward as if pulled by invisible strings. The cat turned to me, its gaze locked on mine, and in that moment the world shifted. Not the fog, not the village. Me. A memory surfaced, not a memory of this life. A memory of another. I stood in the village square, surrounded by faces that loved me. Faces that trusted me. Faces that depended on me. I felt their hands on my shoulders, their voices calling my name, their warmth anchoring me to a life I had lived for years. And the cat watched from the shadows, its pale eyes fixed on me, waiting, choosing. I saw myself walking through the village, laughing with people I cared about. I saw myself sitting by the well, carving small wooden figures for the children. I saw myself standing at the edge of the fog, staring into the gray as if expecting something to emerge. Then the memory twisted, the fog parted. The cat stepped out, its eyes glowed with cold hunger. The villagers screamed. I ran, the cat followed. The memory shattered. I gasped, stumbling backward. The villagers reached for me, their hands trembling, their voices desperate. Come back to us. Stay with us. Do not forget us again. The cat hissed louder than before, its body trembling with tension. It stepped between me and the villagers, its gaze burning with a cold, merciless light. The villagers froze, their faces twisted, not with fear, with grief, with betrayal, with recognition. They whispered the name again, the name that was not mine. The cat turned to me, and I understood. The villagers were not remembering me wrong. They were remembering the person I had been before the cat unmade me, before it stripped away my bonds, before it erased my relationships, before it chose my face. The cat stepped closer, its eyes locked on mine. I felt something shift inside me, a pressure building behind my eyes, a memory trying to surface. A voice whispered in my mind. Not the villagers, not the house, the cat. You were mine. The fog surged forward, swallowing the villagers. Their voices faded into the gray, their bodies dissolving into silhouettes, then shadows, then nothing. The cat pressed its forehead against my leg, a gesture that felt almost tender. Almost. The house behind me groaned, its walls shifting, its windows trembling. The whispering returned, softer now, like a lullaby sung by a voice that did not understand the meaning of comfort. The cat looked up at me. Its eyes were no longer pale. They were my eyes. The world tilted. The fog closed in. The house whispered the name again. The name that was not mine. The name that had once been mine. The name the cat had taken. The cat stepped back, its gaze never leaving mine, and I understood the final truth. The cat did not distort relationships. It devoured them. It fed on the bonds between people. It fed on the meaning of faces. It fed on the shape of love, and when it was done, it left behind a hollow version of the person it had consumed. A blank slate. A stranger wearing a familiar face. Me. The fog swallowed the village. The house fell silent. The cat sat at my feet, waiting. Not for me to remember, for me to forget, for the next life. For the next bond to unmake, I whispered the name one last time. The name that was not mine. The cat blinked slowly, and the world went dark.